This week on the Destination Angler.
So the first 3 clients I got fired by each one of the clients.
Oh.
I was so clueless. The first ever clients I had, it was a disaster. So the guys kind of looked me up and down, and I knew I was in for a hard day. I just knew it. And they're like, well, is that dog coming with us? And explained she didn't have to. Then I put on a pink indicator, and the guy freaked out. And he's like, well, I'm colorblind. Do you have yellow? So it started to rain, and I turned the boat around. I'm like, hey, will you watch out for me? Because I had all these clothes on. And the guy's like, yeah, I'll watch out. So I'm rowing, and within 10 minutes, I ran into a friend's boat. And I looked at this guy, and he had fallen asleep in my boat. I was just like, oh, my gosh. It was just a disaster.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa.
Hey listeners, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to get all the great Destination Angler episodes coming your way. You can join in the conversation on Instagram and the Destination Angler Connection on Facebook, where we post a ton of pictures of the destinations we feature and the top flies our experts recommend. Our show today is brought to you by J.P. Ross Fly Rods, makers of happiness, one fly rod at a time. Get outside and simply fish. Coming up on the podcast, we have landlocked salmon on the west branch of the Penobscot River in the great state of Maine. And be sure to backcast to our last 2 episodes for a fireside chat with the living legend himself, Mr. Joe Humphreys, who shares stories and fly fishing advice from a lifetime of adventures on his home waters of Spring Creek in central Pennsylvania. What a treat! And today our destination is Craig, Montana in the legendary Missouri River. And our guest is expert guide and 5-time Spey-O-Rama casting champion Whitney Gould with Headhunters Fly Shop in Craig, Montana. The Missouri River is a nutrient-rich tailwater famous for large fish, prolific hatches, and some of the best dry fly fishing in the state of Montana, where anglers come from the world over to sting trophy rainbows and browns on this gold medal system. A little bit about Whitney. She holds the women's Spey-O-Rama record two-handed cast at 150 feet. Wow! And she's on Team USA competing and spey casting around the world. She spends her summers as a guide on the Mighty Mo and winters chasing steelhead on the California coast. Whitney gives us a great overview of the famous quality water below Holter Dam and shares some very funny stories, like how she was fired by her first 3 clients and what you need to know to take on this magical river with confidence. But before we get started, we have a listener profile from Colorado. Okay, so today we have a short segment with Taylor, who is a Destination Angler listener, and by the looks of her Instagram profile, appears to be a pretty hardcore angler. Taylor, thanks for listening to the show, and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, and I absolutely love your podcast. It's my favorite.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. How long have you been listening?
Since the beginning of COVID, maybe a little bit after. I think I started listening in June of 2020.
No kidding.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how long your podcast has been going, but I definitely had enough that I was able to go and binge listen.
Okay, good. That's nice of you. All right, so tell us about you. What's your background? Where are you from, and where do you live now?
Well, I'm originally from Boone, North Carolina, and I was a professional snow skier for 10 years and kind of followed the snow out west. Spent a few years in Tahoe, California, and now I'm living in Dillon, Colorado. Shortly, in 30 days, I'm going to be moving to Cotter, Arkansas. So I'm really excited about.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the trout capital of the USA.
That's what they say down there. I know it. I've been to Cotter. Have you been to Cotter?
I have a couple times. I have family down there, and it's just a wonderful little place.
Yeah, it's a little town, right? So you're from Boone. So Boone's a good-sized town, isn't it?
Well, technically I say Boone because not a lot of people know where Banner Elk is, but I'm technically from Banner Elk.
I've heard of Banner Elk. All right, so tell us about the kind of fishing you're into in Colorado.
Well, if I had a day and you're like, hey, you have the day off, go fishing, 100%, I would love to take my 3-weight out with a dry fly and cast a brook trout.
Okay.
I love the high alpine lakes, but there are a couple of smaller beaver ponds in the immediate area around me that don't require too much of a hike. It just requires a high clearance vehicle.
Nice.
Yeah, them fish tend to be real stupid.
Yeah. You catch a lot of them, huh?
Yeah, there's one lake I went to. It was an 11-mile hike, so it was a hard hike to it. But those fish were so not line shy. They had never seen many anglers, and I think I had like 100 fish day.
Oh my gosh. You can do that in those alpine lakes, can't you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's fun. So alpine lakes, is that kind of your thing?
Yeah, 100%. I would rather be up in the alpine hunting for brookies or cutthroat. Like, I like going on the river. And if I had to choose a river in Colorado to go fly fish any given day, it'd be the Eagle.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've never been there. What's it like?
Oh my gosh. Not only is it warm and desert feeling, and so it's nice to get out of like Summit County and away from the snow and the cold. Not a lot of people go over there because it's so far away from Denver. Most people are going to Deckers or the Dream Stream or the Platte. So not a whole lot of people are making that drive up to the Eagle. So I can go out to one of my favorite spots on the Eagle on any given Saturday. It's sunny, it's beautiful, and I'm the only one out there.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and there are days like I went day before yesterday and took one of my very good friends that she's been fly fishing for a while, but she hasn't really caught a whole lot just because she hasn't really been doing it a whole lot. And we both got our personal best that day out of a crappie pond, no less.
Really?
Yeah, we both pulled in like 6 to 7 pound rainbow trout.
Really? Out of a pond?
Yeah, out of pond. I was literally just there to show her how to fight a crappie because I wanted her to know how to fight a fish before we got her on a trout. And the first fish she hooked into was a 7 pound rainbow trout. I'm like, okay, let's go with it.
Yeah, right. That's a pretty nice first fish. Oh my gosh. You're kind of new to fly fishing, you were telling me just before we clicked the record button here. But it sounds like you're doing pretty well. What are the keys to success in catching a 7 pound, 8 pound rainbow?
Well, for me, most of my success was because when I first went out, it's been a little bit over a year. March 18th was my year anniversary.
For fly fishing?
Yeah, I went out with a guide. 100% go out with a guide, ask your questions,
yeah,
get their knowledge. You're paying for that knowledge.
Smart.
And then I think it was like 3 months into my fly fishing, I actually started dating a Northwest endorsed guide. So, I mean, if you can do that, do that.
Work that in.
Yeah, because he definitely helped me out a whole lot more than I would have been able to help myself. But there are a lot of times that he's like, no, you need to figure this out yourself. I'm not giving you the answer.
Tough love.
Yeah, it is definitely. So, like, I mean, if you can date a guide, then do it. But if not, honestly, the Joan Wolfe casting instruction video, that's like one of the better things that I've watched to really help my casting and the knowledge I have of why you mend, why you might do a high R, like just so many different things, like so intriguing what she has in that video, as well as the YouTube videos, the new fly fisher or the new fly fisherman.
Right. Those are good.
Those ones are really good. They really explain like leader to tippet setups and everything.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you've been really successful. So I'm looking at your Instagram profile, and not only have you been really successful with catching fish, but your photography is beautiful.
Well, thank you. It's an Android I have. I don't have a camera. It's just a cell phone.
Okay, now you're doing some amazing things with it. What? Give us some tips on photography. What do you think it takes to take a good shot of a fish?
When I take a picture of a fish, I don't like to take a picture of it in the net because the net obviously casts weird shadows on it and it takes away from the actual fish. I like to make the fish the centerpiece. So whether that's holding it up in front of the background or in front of myself, or laying it very gently in the shallow water with the rod, where it can still breathe, obviously, like just making it the centerpiece. And then obviously, like if I've chosen to post a picture of a trout, it's not going to be like, oh, here's a picture of me and you can barely see this trout. It's going to be like, I'm long arming that fish, but why wouldn't I when it's a beautiful fish? Why wouldn't you want to advertise that fish?
Yeah, some gorgeous shots. Let me ask you this. I don't run into a ton of women when I'm trout fishing, but I think it's great when I do. And I'm just curious, what would you say to all the women out there who are maybe thinking about taking up fly fishing?
Do it. 100% saved my life.
Really? How so?
Like, I was in a relationship that was very abusive, and I was trying to leave him, and he bought me a fly rod trying to get me to stay because he knew I wanted to try it. Well, I left him and took the fly rod, and it 100% gave me a way to meditate and to heal, and it was something that was very therapeutic. So, like, whether or not you're going through a hard time, it is one of the best things you can do mentally for yourself.
Cal, no kidding. Good for you, Taylor. Well, I'm glad you got out of that messy relationship, and I'm glad you took up fly fishing. The world is a better place.
Yeah, fish are nice, nicer than people.
Sometimes. I agree. I don't know. Some that break me off, I'm not very happy with. Other than that, All right, so you've got these big plans for the future, moving to Cotter, Arkansas. What are you going to be doing down there?
So hopefully I'm going to be starting into the guiding.
Oh, that's great. Well, I tell you what, that's a great place to fly fish, right? There's, I think there's some world record trout that have come out of some of the water down that way.
Oh yeah, that's what I've heard.
Of course. Okay, well, Taylor, what is your Instagram handle? How do people get in touch with you that way?
My Instagram handle is flyfishingfarfour. So Farfour is my last name. It's spelled like far away and the number 4, Farfour. That's Fly Fishing Farfour.
Well, Taylor, thanks so much for being on the show. It was great to hear your story, and good luck down there in Cotter.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and can't wait for your next episode.
So let's catch a little swing fever as Whitney dials us into the incredible fishing opportunities on the Mighty Mo. Welcome to the show, Whitney. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Sure. So now you've been out west in California, hoping to do some steelhead fishing, but that didn't work out. And now you're back in Montana, correct?
That's correct. Yep. I just got back on Saturday. It was minus 11 when I got back, and it's finally warming up. It's 25 today.
Well, good. Well, hopefully that phone will ring and you'll get some guiding trips yet this winter, huh?
Yep. Headhunters, or the two guides that I work for, the two outfitters I work for, already got me on the book. So it's looking good this year.
Yeah. Now, are those typically locals that are people from Montana who want to be guided in the middle of the winter, or are these people from out of state? Or
the people who are coming this time of year are probably people who are pretty close by. The weather here changes so quickly, so to fly in this time of year would be pretty difficult.
Yeah, I would think.
So I get a lot of people from Helena and Great Falls, repeat clients, some people from Missoula, and some from Bozeman. And they keep an eye on the weather, and they'll call up Headhunters Fly Shop and book me for a day to go spey casting this time of year.
Good for you.
Yeah, I also do a lot of spey casting lessons this time of year and single hand casting lessons. Keep me busy.
Yeah, very good. So let's dig in. Let's talk about the Missouri River at Craig, Montana. So what is it about this area, this spot along the Missouri River that makes it such a mecca for the serious angler?
It's a beautiful river. I guide the 35 miles from Holter Dam down to Cascade. It's a great river. It has a lot of fish, some really prolific bug hatches. There's something like 18,000 biomass per square meter bugs. So, and it's really beautiful. I mean, in its own way, it's not the Rocky Mountains, it's not Yellowstone Park, but it's got a beauty that is, pretty special.
Yeah. And because it's a tailwater, it's not really affected by runoff. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I believe there was they have I guess it's federally mandated. So the feds, I think it can't go below 2,300 or something like that. I have it written down somewhere, but yeah. So the river always has water.
That's great.
Yeah, it's really good. The lower river right now is an ice jam, but the upper river is open and free to fishing if you want to brave the cold.
All right, so orient us here a little bit. So where is Craig, Montana? Where is that?
Craig, Montana is on Highway 15. It's in between Helena and Great Falls.
Okay, and it's kind of a just a little trout bum town, isn't it?
Yeah, it's trout. It has 3 fly shops, 1 restaurant, and 1 bar.
Just what anglers need. What else could we want?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! So I was reading on your Headhunters website that. It said, quaint and peaceful aren't words we use to describe Craig. It can be a little rowdy, but it's still kid friendly. There's nothing here to do but fish and enjoy the river. So leave your golf clubs at home. Does that sound about right?
That is right. Yeah, that's true. There's everybody pretty much comes to fish. There's a lot of boaters in the summer. People from Helena, the local communities will come out in the summer and get on their rafts and float the river. But other than that, there's really not much to do. I mean, it's all river oriented. It's great. Yeah.
I see. Like, where do people stay when they're fishing multiple days there?
So there's a few places. The fly shop itself has, if you call Headhunters Fly Shop, they have a bunch of rentals. You can call them. There's some Airbnbs, I believe, but yeah, call Headhunters Fly Shop. They have a bunch of rentals. So
they can put you up.
They can put you up, and some places have kitchenettes and some places don't. So some places have microwaves. Yeah.
Very nice. So let's talk about the fishery some more. Can you kind of describe, the major sections that you're fishing, like kind of break it down for us? How does the character of the water change as you progress downstream from Holter Dam?
Yeah, so the places, like I mentioned before, where we fish is between Holter Dam and Cascade. And I learned this from other people, so this isn't my words, by the way, but it's basically broken up into 3 different categories. The top is the upper. It's kind of ditch-like. We call that the dam run. And then there's the canyon, and then there's below the canyon is past Pelican, and that's the lower river.
Okay.
And the upper area, prior to getting the canyon, is it's really a giant spring creek. It's a tailwater that acts like a spring creek in nature. And then the canyon is kind of the water in the middle. It's easily recognizable water to fish. It's got riffles. It's more, people kind of consider it, when the guides come from other towns, they like fishing that area because it reminds them more of a freestone, though it's not a freestone, right?
Right.
And then below that, below Pelican, it's harder to read. It kind of spreads out. It's where your more seasoned anglers like to go. The fish aren't necessarily on the edges all the time. They're kind of spread out. It doesn't always fish. Sometimes it fishes, sometimes it doesn't. So it's more of a gamble down there, but it can be as good too. So
maybe rewarding for the angler that wants a challenge. Well, you just mentioned something about how the fish are more spread out in some of these areas. So is are the flows such that you can get in there and can a wader get in there and fish across the river, or is it pretty shallow all the way across? What's it like there?
No, it's not shallow. I wouldn't wade across the river anywhere in Missouri, unless you had an island and you knew the river really well. It's a big river. It's easy to wade. There's plenty of wading accessibility. But no, I wouldn't wade across it. But there are people that strictly only wade fish and year round, and there's a lot of wading. Yeah.
Oh, there is. Okay.
And I wade fish a lot too. I mean, when some of my guiding is dependent on wade fishing, and fishing out of the boat.
Okay. And when you've got a big river like that, what are some of your thoughts on reading water? What can you tell people who are listening? When you've got such a big river and so much water to cover.
Right. So the Missouri isn't as always easily read, but what I do is, and what the shop does, is they'll tell people kind of where to go. And I would look at it by sections, find a spot and look for the smaller river in the river itself. Look for drop-offs. Maybe look for a flat certain time of year. Certain time of year, you want to look for drop-offs. You look for riffles. You look for faster water. I would try to look for those smaller sections within the bigger river and work from there. You can easily get lost in its size. It's a big river. Most people fish it from a boat, and like the guides themselves will fish solely out of the boat. A lot of the individual fishermen that come here on their own, they'll go from spot to spot to spot and find a spot, maybe spend the morning in that one spot fishing it, and then move on to the next spot.
How's public access?
Public access is great. I mean, it's from Craig up. There is a easement. Sterling Ranch has an easement, and you can access the river. So river right as you're rowing down the river from, I believe it's from Wolf Creek down. You can access all that river on river right.
Nice.
There's a bunch of walk-ins areas. You just want to shut the gates and leave everything as found. And that's on the river side of the road as you're driving up the access road. So if you look to the right also, you'll see that. The left side of the road where the guy up to the hills and stuff, they don't want you on that property at all. So it's just for between the river and the road as you're driving up and as you're floating down. So it's right and right.
Okay.
Yeah, and Headhunters Fly Shop, they have a map. So what happens is a lot of anglers will come into town, and I would stop there, and I would talk to them. The guides, the shop owners, and the kids that work in there are really sweet, and they'll give you a map and help you out with some access points and where to go, and give you some flies and tell you, what's fishing that particular time of day, what the guides are fishing. They'll totally hook you up. There's no mystery in it. They're there to sell you bugs and information.
Of course. So this is a tailwater, but the water comes off the top, correct? So do things heat up in August?
Yeah, they heat up a lot in August. In fact, August is a time where things slow down for us. I don't like to fish in August. I actually go off and go fish on my own. I'll head over and go summer steelheading on the Deschutes, or last year we were going to the Green River. Some girlfriends and I went over. And this year I'm supposed to go to August. I'm supposed to go to Sweden to cast for Team USA. So August can get really warm and it gets really weedy. The thing about the Missouri is it does have what we call the weed hatch. And August is the highlight of that. Yeah, and you get low water. So, you don't really want to be fishing when the water gets a certain temperature. It's just not very good for the fish.
Yeah. What's your favorite time to fish?
I don't really have a favorite time to fish. That's a hard question. It's like asking what your favorite book is. I have a lot of different times I like to fish for a lot of different reasons, right? This time of year or a little bit later, I like to swing flies. It's, nobody's on the river. I can go out and pretty much find a spot and know that I'm not going to see another angler or not get stink eye from one of my fellow guides because I'm standing in a spot that they want to be fishing.
Yeah.
So it's just a fun, it's a good time of year. I like fishing streamers. Growing up, some of my favorite fishing was fishing streamers. It's right, chucking and ducking.
Yeah.
Streamers to hitting the banks and stuff on freestone rivers. And, I just really love that grab, the feeling of a fish, moving that fly, the really interactive part of it.
Yeah.
Figuring out what depth to get it at. Do I want to sink it here? Do I want to jig it here? Do I want to pull it up? Trying to figure out that depth and where those fish are sitting and how they're taking it. Because, every day they take it differently. Sometimes they want a slow retrieve. Sometimes they want it really fast. Sometimes they don't want you to retrieve it at all. So that's, that I just really love streamer fishing, and I like doing it with a two-handed rod and using old techniques such as broadside presentations and stuff like that. And then, I really love the beginning of PMDs, dry fly fishing. The fish are really, really dumb. Like they're just like, woohoo, the fish are out, and it's that first 2 weeks of PMDs. And then they get educated, and then they get really stinky and really, every boat has gone down. Yeah, they just get really difficult to think. So the beginning of PMDs, and I love the caddis fishing in early fall.
Okay.
So, and then, all through that, I like swinging soft tackles at night.
At night?
Well, not when it's dark. This is northern Montana, so it stays light out till about 11 or 12 at night. So, it's pretty far north.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
Until it gets dark. So.
Hey, anglers, if you get excited about small stream fishing, then you need to know about JP Ross fly rods. If being outside nurtures your soul, if holding a fish of any size is like gold to you, if you believe that a fly rod should be a reflection of yourself and what you love, then you need to know about JP Ross fly rods. JP Ross produces many types of handmade fly rods, over 7,000 since 1997, but they are best known for their small stream collection and their passion for building relationships with their customers to help them be happy by being outside. I had a chance to fish one of these gems recently in Michigan and was blown away with its performance, beauty, and effortless casting. JP Ross himself was featured on my recent podcast on the Adirondacks, so check that out when you get a minute. And you can check out JP Ross Fly Rods at, you guessed it, jprossflyrods.com. Be sure to mention coupon code HAPPYFISH to receive $50 off any rod purchase. Like I always say, if you know how many fly rods you have, you don't have enough. So put a smile on your face and pick up a JP Ross fly rod before your next trip. Get outside and simply fish. Now, you talked about a broadside presentation a minute ago. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so it's an old technique, and I guess I would contribute it to A.H.E. Woods, called it a broadside presentation. And basically what you want to do for as long as possible throughout the swing, you use an upstream or downstream mend throughout the swing to control the direction of the fly and maximize the amount of time the fly is presented broadside to the fish. So basically they're seeing the side profile of the fish, not the broadside of the fly.
Gotcha.
Not the butt of the fly. So they're seeing a bigger silhouette.
I see. So you're trying to get that fly to swim across the current rather than up and down the current. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. And you use a mend either upstream or downstream to make that happen, to maximize the time that fly is presented that way. And then a lot of times if I cast it out, I'll pull mend it or do a mend so I can get the fly where I want it in the water column. And then right as it comes under tension, that's when I'll start adding movement to the fly. So there's a point where you can feel it and you're like, oh, there it is. And you can either start to jig it or retrieve it or, figure eight it, retrieve, or so strip it or move the rod tip or hand twist it. It's a lot of fun.
Is that mostly spey casting you're doing that with, or could people go out with their 9-foot 5-weight?
Yeah, you can do it with single hand rods also. I mean, the thing about spey casting is it's just a different gear. You can do everything you can do with a spey rod you can with a single hand rod. And a lot of times I'll use spey casting techniques on smaller rivers because I don't want to use a two-handed rod. So I'll bring my single hand rod, like it's just a 5-weight single hand rod. And I'll use those techniques to either fish a soft tackle or a streamer. What I don't use spey cast or the spey casting techniques or steelhead techniques or whatever we call it. I don't use those for dry fly fishing. I use real, tried and true dry fly, because you don't want that fly to drag, right?
Exactly.
Just like, as Mark Reiser said, dry flies don't swim.
Yeah, not many. Although I've had quite a few guides that say skating dry flies. And like in the driftless area in Wisconsin, you have to move your fly if you want to do well up there. So it kind of depends in some fisheries, right? If you want to jiggle your fly.
Right. And also like during caddis, the caddis will, in faster water,
they move a little bit.
Move a caddis around. Yeah. Also, I forgot to talk about, we have a hopper fishing here too. And you want to twitch that every once in a while.
Yeah. Those guys are struggling.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the Missouri where you're fishing, what, like an average angler on an average day, what can you expect in terms of, fish size, numbers, that kind of thing?
I have the numbers here. I'm not very good at, people ask me this in the boat and I'm like, I don't know, but, cause I never remember, but I did, look it up and, there's about 3,500 catchable rainbows, 10 inches or better per mile on the Missouri, 700 to 800 browns per mile, and 250 fish over 20 inches per mile.
Really? How many? 250 over 20?
Yeah, per mile. Now, you're not going to always get those fish, right?
But they're in there. I mean, it's nice to know they're in there.
They're in there, yeah. Sometimes it's good to know, and sometimes you're just like, oh my God, where'd they all go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about the Missouri is it's different than any, I love freestone rivers for this because, and also Alaska for this, that fish are eating because they're hungry, right? Their biomass per square meter is like 5 to 1,000, right? So they're eating to eat. They see that hatch or matching that hatch to eat. Missouri River has 18,000. It's a huge river, but it's got a huge biomass. So they could be downriver. They could just be chowing on nymphs all day long. They're not, they're eating sometimes to eat, but they don't always have to eat, right? Your dry fly. They're not going to say, hey, I want that because they're probably full on the million of nymphs they've eaten down below the river. So That's what makes this river somewhat technical. And like, you know, in Alaska, when I used to guide for trout up there, they'd come out of freeze, and you know, they were looking for anything that had, you know, protein.
Yeah.
So you could throw a giant mouse and expect to get that fish. Here, when PMDs come out for whatever reason, they're all excited and, you know, they're just like, woohoo. But then after a while, they just either they get used to all the boat. It just all of a sudden they get closed lipped, dry, you know, pretty, or they get pretty technical. You can't skitter that fly. You've got to make sure that fly lands and dries and they see it, and you got to figure out where they're looking at. They could be looking at that for that fly up above your boat, you know, they have, rather than putting it right on their head, they're going to be like, no, you know, so.
Would you say as the season progresses and they see more and more flies and more boats, does it get harder and harder as the season progresses?
Oh, yeah. At least I assuming, yes. I mean, I'm not a fish, but I'm pretty 100%
pretty fishy though, aren't you?
That's the case. Well, yeah, you can see it. It's really funny because, like, okay, so you get these dry fly anglers, and you know that, like, say, two of your other buddies have dry fly only anglers, and you're on the same beat. Pretty much know that, like, there's spots that the fish are rising in, and you know, you're going to pick up your anchor and you know, and you'll see a pot of fish or something. You can pretty much assume that somebody else has fished for those fish that day or the day before, right? So you've got to be on game and on point. And so, like, there is never one fly. It's just like at that point, if I got an angler that can do it, we'll sit there and just change flies until that flatfish, he gets the right presentation.
Interesting.
And the right fly. Yeah.
Try this, try this, try this.
Yeah. It's just like, okay. I mean, everybody has their starter fly, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you're just like, or you'll throw everything in your box and the angler will go, here, try this. And it's just
something out of their box and it works.
It's amazing. Yeah.
As a guide, Whitney, I got to ask you, on those days where you're just constantly tying on flies, does it ever start feeling like work versus, you know, fun?
It really depends on the angler. Right. So there's some guys out there who are just like, they love it. They're having fun. They don't care. They could spend all day on that one fish, all day. Right. And then you've got the other angler who's kind of stressed. He really wants that fish. He wants to catch like 10 fish, or he's on a group trip with all their buddies and doesn't want to be the only one to go home and say he didn't catch a fish. Right. And that guy's stressing out, and then he's going to stress you out. I've had that happen to me before. It's just like, or, you know, or he went out with another guide before, the day before, and it's just like, well, we caught 3 fish. It's just like,
I can hear that.
You know, and
yeah.
And you're just like, then it becomes a chore.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's a confidence between angler and guide, right? And that's a key indication that your angler doesn't really trust in you and then in himself, right? I mean, he's putting all the onus on you to catch that fish when actually it's he who has to catch the fish. You know, you've got him on the spot, you've got him on the plate, you've got him on the fly.
Right.
At that point, it's up to them. So, and that's when it becomes, you know, you're just like, this isn't any fun anymore. I mean, it's a recreational sport, right?
Right. Will you give those great anglers who are a lot of fun, will you give them an extra hour at the end of the day, or is it still, nope, we're heading back at 5, or what's your philosophy there?
So I stay out pretty much as long as I need to. I know what time I'm going to be at the boat ramp. You know, I don't want to keep them out there for 10 hours because they're too tired by the end of the day. I mean, it's hot, it's sunny, but I'm also, you know, going to keep them out. Sometimes we'll do split days on really hot days where meet them early in the morning, take them home for lunch, and meet them in the evening. Yeah, sometimes I'll do that, but I won't do that with somebody I don't know. You know, that's something you do with your repeat clients, that you know somebody who's going to appreciate that extra work. And, you know, I had a friend he's a longtime guide here, and he had a client who just comes up. Has a client who just came out and dry fly fishes only. He came out here for a week and didn't get one shot, not one shot. And he wouldn't do anything else. He just, and the guy, this was not in my boat, but it just, nobody was doing well that week. The rest of us could convince our anglers to do something else. But that guy left having a great time, and he rebooked for the next year.
It's called fishing for a reason.
Yeah, it's just not always about catching, right? If that was the case, you wouldn't be an angler.
Well, tell me about the month of May, because this is what I keep hearing from other guides. There's a lot of guides who go to Missouri, right where you are, in the month of May because everything else is blown out, but you can still guide trips on the Missouri. Is it just a zoo down there in May, or is there always room?
Oh, yeah, it's a huge. It's a zoo.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's a zoo. This is actually a really funny story. So before I started guiding here, and this is a long-about way to say yes, it is a zoo.
Okay.
To answer the question, so if I get sidetracked. So I guided on the Clearwater for steelhead this one season, and Headhunters brought out a group of anglers because Mike and I had been teaching spey casting prior, and so we had a relationship. So they did a hosted trip. And Mark was fishing with me, and we had just caught a fish. One of the clients, Terry Armstrong, one of my favorite clients in the whole world, caught a fish, his first steelhead. He was all excited, and Mark was all excited. Mark is one of the outfitters I work for. And about 3 miles upriver, I see these guys start walking down. And I'm flipping out. I'm like, why are they coming here? They've got to go away. Mark's like looking, he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, those little people up there. And I was like, yeah. And it turned out they were headhunter guides coming to join us. But I was flipping out. I was like, why are they coming in on us?
Like, this is your spot.
Yeah. And Mark was like, oh boy. And they had just hired me. And he was just like, he's like, slightly is like, yeah, your big issue is going to be all the people. And I'm like, what do you mean? And the first couple of weeks I started guiding, I get to the boat ramp, and the first year I was here was in 2017. So it was high water and everything was blown out. I think the Missouri River got up to like 20,000 CFS, some ridiculous number like that. We were fishing in people's backyards. But that first year, and I remember showing up to the boat ramp and hyperventilating, like, oh my God, this is horrible. I mean, there was this whole like system of how to launch your boat and lines and stuff. And, when you first show up, it's not always apparent, but like, luckily I had my friends and they all kind of keyed me into it. But yeah, it can get really busy at times. Yeah. And this year was very busy with COVID.
I heard. Yeah. So what's your strategy when it's super busy as a guide? Like, what do you do?
I try to do my own thing as anybody else, and I try to ignore what everybody else is doing. Try to stay out of people's ways. Sometimes I'll push, sometimes I'll hold back. Just everybody makes a mistake once in a while. You're going to, because it's so big and you're paying attention to your clients, and, just try to keep it cool. And people will test you, especially as a newer guide. They'll just be like, oh, they'll drop anchor right in front of you. That hasn't happened. My first year that happened a bit, but that hasn't happened in a while. So
really,
yeah, you just kind of go around them and smile.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I was going to buy you a beer, but not anymore.
Yeah, right. You just kind of do be,
Yeah.
And the thing also that if you're nymphing, it doesn't really matter, to be honest, early season here. The fish are all in a few spots. You just kind of figure out where they are, and everybody knows where they are. There's no secrets, and everybody's probably fishing pretty much the same thing. It's just being courteous. And some people will do a bunch of row rounds. That means they go through the run, they catch a fish, they go back up, they do that. My way of dealing with it is maybe I'll go do 2 row rounds, but I'm not going to spend all day in one spot. In a lot of ways, that earlier season, because I don't do that, and because I try to avoid those spots, that's pretty much how I deal with it.
Yeah. This is what I've heard about the Missouri. I've heard that it's got larger than average fish for Montana. It's got better than average hatches and dry fly fishing. Matter of fact, the first time I heard about the Missouri was from a friend of mine who does a lot of fish. He's got a place in Montana, and he said it was the best dry fly fishing he's ever had. I've heard the dry fly fishing maybe isn't quite as good as it used to be, but there's still reasons that people are flocking to the Missouri, right? Even though it's a little crowded.
Right. Yeah, I think it's the dry fly fishing is technical. It's hard. it might not be good as it used to be because the fish are still there, the bugs are still there. They might just be getting a little bit more pressure, but I don't know, right?
Hard to know. All right, so Whitney, tell me about your first year as a guide. You were talking about that a little while ago. How was that first year?
Oh, that was brutal. It was brutal. Yeah, as a first year guide, you don't have a clientele yet, and people don't really trust you. And on top of that, I'd never nymphed with an indicator really before.
Learning on the job.
Yeah, I just think nymphing on an indicator, especially for steelhead, came from a steelhead where I just thought that was, I couldn't even fathom being caught doing it or thinking of doing it. It wasn't the way I fished, right? So getting here, it was just like a huge learning curve, and I had to learn fast. And I was talking to Mark about this the other day, and they just threw me in. I thought I would be in the shop, right? And I'll figure it out, right? And they just threw me in hard. They were like, yeah, you'll figure it out, but you're going to learn on the river.
Yeah.
And actually, it was really funny. So the first 3 clients I had, which was 3 days in a row, I got fired by each one of the clients.
Oh.
Just because I was so clueless. I was just like, I don't know.
I'm sure Mark would say we don't do that anymore. I'm sure I've talked to Mark, your boss there at Headhunters, right?
Yeah, I don't, it was really funny. It's funny. The first ever clients I had, it was a disaster. So I have this dog named Willa, and she's my yellow lab, and steelhead fishing, she'd go with me wherever, and she was always in my boat. So it just never occurred to me that somebody wouldn't want my dog in the boat. She's just total chill, awesome, falls asleep, just might look up every once in a while. Right? So that should have been your first clue. So I walk up with my dog, and John Earl was with me because he's one of the other outfitters I work for. And he walks up and introduces me, and the guys kind of looked me up and down, and I knew I was in for a hard day. I just, it's just I just knew it. I mean, I could tell right off the bat. And they're like, well, is that dog coming with us? And explained she didn't have to. So she went to the shop, and then I started putting the rig together, and I put on, I think it was a pink indicator, and the guy freaked out, and he's like, well, I'm colorblind. Do you have yellow? And I was like, what? And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, no, I don't. And does anybody even make yellow indicators? And I didn't. Yeah, I was just like, no, I don't. I have white, so I threw that on. And we got to there, and it was one of those days where I didn't have enough self-confidence to be like, shut up, we're gonna do this, or this is it. And so it was just a day of questioning and everything I did. I forgot my boat bag. I had to go, call the shop and get my boat bag. But anyway, so it started to rain, and these guys were over it, and I was over it, and I had them. So I turned the boat around, and it was April. So April can be really cold, right? It's just started sleeting and snowing, and I was like, okay. So I turned the boat around. I'm like, hey, will you watch out for me? Because I had all these clothes on. And the guy's like, yeah, I'll watch out. And I was like, okay. So I'm rowing, and within 10 minutes, I ran into a friend's boat. He had parked in the boat, and I couldn't see him. And I looked at this guy, and he had fallen asleep in my boat.
Oh.
And I was just like, oh, my gosh. So it was my friend was laughing about it. He's like, Whitney, you just hit the only rock in the middle of the river. It was me. But it was just a disaster.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah, it was bad. But after that, I pretty much figured it. I started to have to figure it out. You don't ever want to say you completely figure something out. You'll jinx yourself. But I have a pretty good understanding now.
Yeah.
How to nymph on this river.
I'll bet you do.
Yeah, I do. And but the first couple of weeks after guiding, I would go ahead and relaunch my boat by myself and stand up and look over the bow and try to figure out the river. But it was hard. Not only because I had never nymphed before, but it was extremely high water. So I never saw the bottom of the river until maybe about 2 years ago, because 2 seasons ago, just because by the time the river had dropped, there was so much grass, right?
Oh, interesting. I'm glad you're still at it.
Oh, yeah.
We need people like you out there to put smiles on all our faces today. Whitney, you were telling me before the show about a funny story you had with a maybe a slightly elderly lady who had some
Oh, one
problems
of my
one
favorite
day.
clients,
I
Connie.
got to hear about that. Connie, yes.
Connie and Hal Level. They're like, so you have those clients that become really good friends. I actually met Hal first when I was at Alaska, and he and I and this other guy went out and we had an epic first day, like his first day ever salmon fishing. We sat at this, and he landed something like 13 kings that day, swinging flies, and
Wow.
oh yeah, it set the bar high for me and him.
Yeah, that's a great day.
Yeah, it was epic. Hal's a great guy, and so he he brought his wife, and I was guiding on the Grand Ron for Steelhead at the time. I was working for Spey-O-Rama Fly Lodge, and we did overnight trips guiding from between Bogan's Oasis and the Mouth, which is down by the Snake River, and Heller's Bar. And we do 3-day, 4-day overnight trips. And Connie and Hal are longtime clients, and they would come every year. And one year it was late season, and we were just taking off on a 3-day trip, and we get to our first run, and Hal is just driving me nuts and driving Connie nuts. And so I drop him off on the other side of the river.
Oh, you got rid of him.
Connie and I got rid of him. So basically, that's the kind of friendship we have. We can.
I got you. Hal, if you're listening, we still love you.
Yeah, no, he'll know. And Connie and I were the other side of the river, and Connie's one of these great gals who fishes. She'd just gotten a brand new Gary Anderson rod, 12.5 foot 12 foot 6 weight Spey rod, and Hal had just bought it for her. And so we're over and we're kind of rigging it up, and we get it all set up, and I turn around for 2 minutes, and her first cast, I hear this, Whitney. And I turn around, and her rod's going down, like tip over. And I heard her yell, Whitney, again. And no kidding, on the third Whitney, that rod bent so far over, it pulled her in head first in the river. So here's Connie. She's like in her 70s. She's floating head first down the river.
Oh, no.
With this steelhead on the fly line. And I'm just like, oh, my gosh. So I jump in the river, and I grab her. And Hal at this time is yelling, don't lose that rod from across the river.
He wants the rod
don't
to come
lose
back.
that fish across the river. Don't lose the fish and don't lose the rod. And I pull her out of the river, and I put her on the bank, and something happened beforehand. So she's in there, and I get her, and she gets away from me because her rod breaks in half. It doesn't break, but the guides come off, and she dives head first underwater to grab this rod. And I'm like, Connie, this is October, late October.
Wow, hardcore.
I grab her, I throw her on, I grab her, I get her up on the bank, I sit her down. Her waders are full of water, so I grab the rod, put it back together, and the fish is still on. And so I'm like, at this point, the fish is like taking off downriver. So I get it under control. I turn the fish, get it back up. She releases her waders, give her the fly rod. She lands the fish.
Nice.
We revive the fish, and of course, at this point, howls across the river, take a picture. Well, her camera's soaking wet. I don't have a camera.
Oh, really?
But the funny part of this is she loses her hat. She's been in Joseph, Oregon. She has this great hat, and she loses it. So Connie and I are floating downriver, and we're kind of looking for the hat, not, going spot to spot. Next year, we get up there, and I get there, and I go into Bogan's Oasis, and I'm talking to Farrell. I happen to look over, and there's Connie's hat sitting on the wall. And I was like, Farrell, is that your hat? And she goes, oh, no, somebody brought that in. And I said, I know whose hat that is. So I grabbed the hat. And the next time I see them, they come out in October again, and I put Hal across the river again. And this time, different water conditions. He was actually on the better side of the river, and Connie and I are over on the other side of the river. And he hooks into a fish, and he lands it. And Connie and I go rowing over. And or I'm like, this time I'm prepared. I've got a camera and whole 9 yards, and get the picture. And I'm like, Connie, hold on. And I'm like, you get in that picture. And she gets in the picture, and I was like, hold on, I got something for her. And I pulled out her hat and put it on her head.
No, did you? That's great.
So she got her hat back. She was all excited.
All right. How big was that fish that yanked her in the water?
Oh, it was hilarious. It was a 12-pound hen. The Grand Run has a small run of 12-pound hens that go through every year.
All right. Well, enough to pull her in.
Yeah, it was big. I mean, she's teeny. It was hilarious. It was funny river.
Yeah, that makes it all worth it.
Yeah, and then there's Connie soaking wet, and she's taking off her waders, and she's got going into her dry bag and going behind bushes. And I'm like, should we go to Bo again? Should we get you a hot shower? And she's like, no, I just want to keep fishing.
She's tough.
That was a great story. It was fun, I mean, that's what makes being a guide so much fun. It's just that you have these great stories. You meet these really wonderful people. And you get to enjoy their company in a really relaxed situation. And, your job is really as customer service and making sure people are enjoying themselves and having fun. And the fishing happens to be the activity you do during that time. I mean, I could be a ski guide. It's the same thing. They just happen to like fishing.
Sounds like you're pretty darn good at it, too. Let's talk about you. And I'm curious, so how did you end up in Craig, Montana as a fishing guide? Because you were doing guiding up in Alaska, right?
Yeah, I guided for a camp called Alaska West. I was working under a guy named Andrew Bennett. He had owned it, and then he sold it to Jerry Schultz, who owns Rapid Camp. And I had been up there for a while, and during the fall, we'd come back, and in the spring, Mike and I were teaching spey casting classes out here in Montana just to pay for kind of a vacation. I always grew up trout fishing and wanted to come out here and fish. And I had met my husband, Mike McCune, at the time. And so he's actually a very good spey caster. He's a longtime steelhead guide on the Oregon coast. He doesn't do it anymore, but he's one of the founders of spey casting out there. He was actually one of the original guides to spey cast guide out there. He brought Scott O'Donnell out there after he had been there for a few years. But he and I would come out and do spey casting classes, and Headhunters Fly Shop had a two-hand spey casting program where they were doing spey casting in the winter, and so it was just a perfect fit. And I think it was after the third season of doing it, I was like, we were talking, and they're like, and I was trying to think what else I could do rather than go back to Alaska. And they said, why don't you come work for us? And I just said, sure. I didn't really think about it. I was like, yeah, okay. And that's pretty much how it happened. So
Okay. Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
Joined a great shop out there, man.
Oh yeah, it's a really good shop. They're really knowledgeable. They're good people. Yeah, I love it.
Because you were a landscape architect at one point, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I went to graduate school, Rhode Island School of Design, and got my architecture degree. I never took my license. I never became an architect per se, but I worked for landscape architecture firms. I worked for a company called Hargraves Associates.
Okay.
Based out of San Francisco, and then moved up and worked for some shops in Seattle. Worked for a company in Seattle, in Portland, Oregon. And that's really where I found spey casting. I had spey cast before, but I really fell in love with spey fishing. So,
what was it that you think caused you to fall in love with spey casting?
I liked the equipment. It was something new. I happened to be good at it. The cast made sense to me. At that time, it was easier than a single hand cast, an overhead cast. It was the experience. I'd been on the East Coast, so it was really my first experience in the Pacific Northwest, and being introduced to that much landscape and those particular rivers and the Columbia River Basin and all that had to offer was just incredible to me. And so that area and that style of casting and then the steelheads themselves kind of all fell together and for me, and it felt right. So
yeah,
and I fell in love with it. And then the economy had dropped out at that point. The housing market had dropped out, and I was laid off and just had been fishing, and it just kind of steamrolled from there. I got a job at Alaska West, and then the more I guided, the more people asked me to fish. And, there weren't that many women guides at the time that could do what I could do. And there were a few others. So, there was that kind of market too for those who were open enough to have a female guide.
Nice. And now you have the world record Spey cast for women, right? How long was that cast?
Yeah, the Spey-O-Rama record here in San Francisco.
150 feet, is that right?
Yep. 150 feet. I mean, I've cast further than that, and it's been recorded, but I guess in competition, you always lose a few feet. But yeah.
Interesting.
150 feet. And right now I'm training with Travis Johnson, who's a good friend of mine. He's a steelhead guide. If anybody ever wants to go fish the Sandy River or the Deschutes River, he's over there. He's a all waters angler, and I'm working with him, getting my spey casting tuned in to try to go win a world record. A gold
medal.
A gold medal, thank you. And then I'm also working with Chris Corridge, who's training the women's team for single hand casting, and I'm working with him on single hand accuracy and distance. So we'll see.
Oh, good luck with that.
Yeah, I'm excited.
What's sort of the attraction to competing with all this for you?
I don't know. I never thought of myself as a competitive person, but everybody around me says I'm extremely competitive. So I think it's because, I grew up in a neighborhood of 18 boys with 3 brothers, being the only girl. And, growing up with that kind of experience and playing sports my whole life, you just learn how to be a competitor, and you learn, and I've always loved sports. I like being active. I'm extremely ADHD, so I don't sit still very well, and it's something to focus on for an hour and run around. And, I love the athletic ability it takes to compete on that kind of level.
Nice.
And what I really enjoy is the process of the competition. I love, getting ready for a competition. The competition itself, at that point, it's always, even after I win, it always seems kind of like this letdown, because you're just you spend so much time training and working towards assuming in a goal, and then the goal happens, and then all of a sudden you're just it's just something's gone or missing, right?
Right.
So I think that's where it is. It's just maybe I'm addicted to spey casting and competing. So I just love the process of it.
So what kinds of things do you have to do in a competition to win a competition?
You got to practice a lot, but you got to practice smart. It's just not only the ability to be able to perform the cast. It's an all around consuming thing. You need to, for me, I start to work out, or I start to think about my head space, try not to get in my own head too much. It's both physical, mental, and it's everything about it. You just work towards everything. You've got to make sure. I like the kind of the group effort. It's never just you. You're always got a team, right? Whether it's your coach, your team members. I enjoy that kind of collaboration you have with other people to all single-handedly get to a certain goal. I like goals. I'm very goal-oriented.
Good.
I really like that. It's like you're working with somebody else, and it's a community, and I really like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty cool.
So for people that may not be super familiar with spey casting, can you just describe for a minute what spey casting is, like the dynamics of the cast? What are you actually doing there?
So they call it, what it is spey cast is a dynamic roll cast that unrolls over the water. And what separates it from a roll cast is that it has a change of direction. So, a roll cast is singular direction. You pick up the line, you pull it towards you, and then you roll it back out towards the target where you picked it up, the direction you picked it up from.
Yeah.
A spey cast is a fishing cast. So at the end of the run, at the end of the swing or wherever, it's on the dangle, and that's directly downstream from you. But your target is going to either be anywhere from 90 degrees down to 45 to 35 back to the original target, right? Where you pick it up from the end of the swing. So that spey cast is just basically you pick it up and you can turn it towards the roll cast position, change your direction, and go out. So it's just basically a roll cast with a change of direction.
Okay. Is it hard to learn?
Is that hard to learn? No. I think where people get it confused is I think they get it confused because they feel like there's so many casts you have to learn because you can cast off river right or river left. But I think that's a misconception of spey casting. I think there's only really one cast you learn, but there's different ways to manipulate that singular cast to achieve the goal you want. So whether it's an upstream cast off the upstream shoulder or downstream shoulder, or airborne or waterborne, they all have the same dynamics and the same basic cast. It's just how you manipulate that to achieve either an upstream cast or downstream, an up shoulder cast, or a downstream shoulder cast, or a airborne or waterborne. Also, I think people get confused about the equipment, and especially so now with the whole introduction of trout spey. Spey casting and spey equipment has been geared towards larger species, towards like salmon and steelhead.
Sure.
And so it's a bigger, you've got these bigger, longer rods. But now, within the last couple of years, there's been, and I'm not saying that people just started spey casting for trout. That's not the case. But what is the case is that the industry themselves is making more gear towards making that more, they're making gear for specific trout spey in different areas. Trout spey, they always did, you could do a trout spey in Alaska, but those are big fish, right? Those are steelhead sized fish. And so those were your steelhead sized gear. But here we've got spey equipment now that's geared towards, your 18-inch fish, and you're not going to want to take a big steelhead rod to do that. So I think where it gets confusing now is they've got all this new gear, or gear, they've taken the old gear and conformed it and made it more applicable to Western River, lower 48 trout streams rather than steelhead.
And what are they, just shorter rods? Like, what are those, Whitney? Are they just shorter or lighter weight, or what are they?
Yeah, they're shorter and lighter. So spey rod for trout are approximately 10'6" to 11'6". Okay. So they're shorter than a traditional spey rod, but longer than a traditional trout single hand rod. But they cast lines that are weighing from about 175 to 350 grains, and grains is what the weight of a line is the standard of a line. So for a steelhead 7-weight rod, you'd probably cast 520 grains, right? But for a single hand, for a 2-hand 2-weight, you could cast 225 grains, so there's a bigger grain window there. And let me just break this down really. So a trout spey or a baby spey is equivalent to a single hand fly rod, right? And so let's say you had a 1-weight Sage trout spey HD that you would use for soft tackles and delicate work. That's equivalent to your 4-weight single hand rod. Okay. And then like a 2-weight, which is kind of, you're starting a 2-weight 2-hander trout spey rod, is you're getting more soft tackles and light streamer work. And that's more comparable to your 5-weight single hander. And then a 3-weight spey rod is your 6-weight single hand rod. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And so all the companies have different kind of, and where it gets confusing is all the companies have different labels or to categorize their trout spey. They categorize them differently, and I think that's where people are getting confused.
It would be confusing. And then your competition setup, is that totally different from what you've just described?
Oh yeah. My competition spey rod is a 15-foot 1-inch long rod, and it's a 12-weight. And I'm casting about, right now I'm casting about 1,045 grains.
No wonder you have to work out and get in shape for this.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
Exactly. And it's a 70-foot line. So. Oh, geez. I'm using a Gale Force comp line right now. They're made in Europe, and it's one of the best lines out there.
So when would an angler, want to take their spey rod out? Like, what kind of a day do you need to go spey fishing, or is it more river dependent, or what is it? When I'm thinking about this as a trout fisherman, for instance. Right
now, like when you're going to throw streamers, right now would be a great time. basically any time you want. You could take a spey rod out anytime, to be honest with you. But the reality is sometimes they're going to be more productive than others. And the other thing about the Missouri is because you have so many more anglers and so many other boats from so many other places, right? You got to be somewhat cognizant of that. So there's certain times of the day you don't want to go out there spey casting, right?
You're going to hook somebody, you mean?
Yeah, and the other thing is you're trout fishing, you're not steelhead fishing.
Yeah.
And, steelhead fishermen, there's a tradition, you have a run, and that's your run, and there's an ethic where everybody kind of goes around you and leads that run. Well, that's not going to happen on trout rivers, right? You're not going to get that whole run, especially when there's other anglers, right? And you're the new guy on the river. They're going to go down around you. They may give you some space, but some of the guys not. But, some of the other guys who just don't care, they're going to come down and jump right in front of you. And they're doing nothing wrong, really. So to avoid that, I spey cast when I know there's not going to be a lot of boats on the river, or I'll go to places where I know there's not going to be a lot of boats.
Yeah.
But for the fishery itself, April is a great time here when you can find places to stand if the water's not too high. Even though this is a dam-oriented river, tailwater, you are going to get high water, and there's some certain times of the year you're not, especially during runoff, you're not going to be able to find places to stand. On this river, I don't like to spey cast if it's over 9,000 CFS. But the other spot thing is I like to, there's times where if I want to go in the summer, I like to spey cast, but there's got to be bugs, right? Because I'm going to use soft tackles.
Okay.
So that's one thing. And, I'm not going to use a streamer when I know the fish aren't, if you're coming to just only streamer fish and, the fish are keyed in on bugs, they're not going to take your streamer. So a lot of times, so I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that helps. I guess part of me, I'm wondering, if I'm thinking about spey casting, is it just more fun or is it actually more effective for certain types of fishing? Like, why should I consider spey casting?
I like it. It's just a different approach with different solutions, right?
Okay.
It's, the tackle offers a different perspective to traditional trout fishing.
Yeah.
It kind of challenges you to come up with new solutions. I've written this before, but I really believe this to older problems. You're not necessarily going to catch the most fish, right? Because you're fishing a specific way. And sometimes if you might catch more fish that day nymphing, right? Because they're taking subsurface flies. But it's just a fun way of fishing. That doesn't mean to say that there are some times where the fish aren't biting and, we've had better fishing than the guys nymphing, but that's rare.
Okay. So it sounds like it's something different to try and something fun to do, maybe.
Yeah, it is. And, it's for it's for somebody who likes to get out of the boat, because you are fishing out of the boat. You're not fishing from the boat all day, right?
Okay.
I go from spot to spot to spot.
Yeah.
And fish that way.
I'm curious, what's your personal best on a spey rod there on the Missouri?
The personal, this fall, actually, I caught a fish that was over 2 foot, and that's the first time and the only time I've seen a fish that big.
Really? On a spey rod?
I was pretty impressed. Yep, on a streamer, and we were all there to see it. My friend Brett and my husband were there to see it, and nobody had a camera on.
Oh, yeah? Oh, come on. We want to get a picture of that thing.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. I don't take a lot of fish pictures of my own fish.
Yeah, you were telling me that before.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't bother. I when I'm fishing myself, I know.
Yeah, you got a memory.
Yeah.
So tell us, if you could, we were talking about some of the hatches that you really like on the Missouri, but could you kind of walk us through the hatch chart, so to speak, on the Missouri? What can we expect in April, May, June, that kind of thing?
Early season, betas. If you're nymphing, you're going to be fishing a lot of sow bugs and scuds if you're nymphing.
Okay.
Yeah. Then it kind of goes into your PMDs. And then we've got trichos. And somewhere in there are hoppers. Last year was a great hopper season. I wouldn't call the Missouri a hopper river. It's not but last year, for whatever reason, it was really good and it ran into pretty late. Then there's caddis and midges.
What time of year are you seeing a lot of caddis then?
Caddis, September, but they can also, you start fishing for them in July too, in June, July. Yep, you can run some dry caddis, some translucent.
Okay. When's that PMD hatch?
June, July, end of June, July.
Okay.
The funny thing is about it is I've been here. This is my 5th season, going to be my 5th guide season here. And I can't put my finger on when exactly it's going to start. This year, it seems like this past year, everything was 2 weeks out than it was the year prior. So, and then Trico's never even really showed up and got going this year. So it's typical, I guess, from what I understand. I don't have enough experience to say, well, 8 years ago, But yeah, end of June and July, you can pretty much, hopefully, PMDs will be here.
What are your top patterns? What do you recommend there for the Missouri?
Well, caddis, I like the translucent caddis. That's just a good all around. It's kind of a translucent emerger. It's kind of a good buggy, wet. I like buggy flies. Anything that's really, truly buggy. I don't know.
A lot of hair and legs. Is that what you mean?
That's my steelhead coming in. Something that, buzz balls are fun. PMDs, I don't really have a favorite one. Just start out with big and start getting smaller and smaller and smaller and less and less.
Okay.
But down to, I do like the hangman. That's a good one. Betas, I had my friend tied up a bunch of these really cool Betas flies I use. I don't know how to describe them. They're an L-pair thing.
Okay.
So a pattern to me is more about the size and shape about it and the color. It's never a specific pattern.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So, yeah, I always feel like that's always tied for the angler rather than the fish. It's like, I'll look down and I'll see the PMDs might be slightly rust color that day. And that's what I'll put on.
Yeah. Match it a little bit.
Trying to match the particular hatch that day.
So when you think about, what top anglers are doing there, the most successful anglers, what would you say that they're doing maybe that the less successful anglers are doing?
They know their water. They have a plan, and they don't switch around. They stick to it. I've seen, and that's a lesson I had to learn here. They stick to their guns. They trust in what they're doing, and they keep with it, even though at times it can be difficult.
So what does that mean, to have a plan? Like when you have a plan, what's that look like?
Well, so for example, your angler, you kind of assess what they want to do, you assess what their skill level is, and you kind of formulate a plan, and you're like, okay, we'll nymph for maybe 3 minutes, 3 hours, and get some fish to the boat or whatever, and then we'll dry fly all day, and we'll stick to it. We'll go to spot to spot to spot, or we'll run dries or whatever it is they're doing, and if an hour goes by and they don't catch a fish, they're still going to stick to it because within maybe an hour and a half, they're going to get that fish, right? That one fish that's going to make the whole day.
Okay.
And they have a knowledge of the water. I mean, the Missouri River isn't necessarily always easy to fish because it's such a big water. And, you see some of the freestone guys come over, and the first day they're over, you can tell they're a little bit lost, and they're kind of trying to figure out what you guys are doing or there, because they'll dial it in after that, shortly after, or some of them have enough experience, they'll just know exactly where to go.
Good reason to hire a guide on the first day.
Yeah, and those guys, and that's the other thing, that the Missouri River can change from day to day to day, and that the people stick to it. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to run the same rig all day, but they're going to make that rig work, right?
Yeah.
And figure out what level. This river is really weight dependent, how much weight you're going to fish in which specific water.
Okay, that's some great tips there. I have a question for you. Where can anglers, at the end of the day on the Missouri, where can they go to get a bite to eat and something to drink?
Okay, so there's a few places. So in Craig, Montana itself, there's Isaac's Restaurant. John does a really good job with the food, and then he's got a kind of a bar there. But there's also Joe's. Everybody after eating will go and hang out at Uncle Joe's, and that's kind of like the local watering hole.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then up in Wolf Creek, there's Shotgun Annie's is a restaurant, and the Oasis. And then in Cascade, there's the Driftwood, the Angus, and then the Homestead. But more importantly, there's more River Eats. Kelly is a good friend of mine, and she does a service. She makes all of our lunches for us, guide lunches. But what she does is she can also cater your dinner. So what she'll do is she'll cook your dinner, leave it at your house, right? This is great, especially during COVID. Leave it at the cabin that you're staying at in the oven, and then you come home and you've got fresh food ready for you to go. And she does breakfasts and lunches, and I think she'll even do in-house catering too. So, and that's Mo River Eats.
River Eats.
M-O River
Mo
Eats.
River Eats.
Yes.
M-O. All right. Well, I'll put that on my show notes on the website. And then it would be awesome if we could get like a picture of your fly box, Whitney, and put that out there for people to see. Would that be all right?
Yeah, I'll show you. They're all over the place right now, so I'll put them all on the table. I'm in the midst of organizing.
Okay. Well, how can people get in touch with you?
So I'm an independent contractor. I'm not an outfitter. So I work for two outfitters. I work for Falls River Guide Service and Get the Drift Guide Service. And they both are John Arnold and Mark Reisler, and they happen to own Headhunters Fly Shop. So if you call Headhunters Fly Shop, they book for both of those outfitters, and I guide for those outfitters.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll put all this information out on our website. Folks, thank you for listening. And Whitney, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to come.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Whitney works really hard getting ready for the World Championships, and she wanted me to give her coaches, Chris Korich and Travis Johnson, a big shout out. Folks, you can email me with any comments or suggestions at essay50@gmail.com. As always, our music is by Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again soon.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see. Yeah.